afternoon, everyone. Please continue to enjoy your lunch as we work through and get all the food out to you. Today we're going ahead and starting our program. My name is Mike Stevenson. I'm Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Sam Houston State University, and it's an honor to welcome you to this special day. I'd like to thank and acknowledge the hard work that's been provided by the Office of Sponsored Research Programs, who have assembled an incredible lineup for this two-day event that we have had today. So thank you all very much for ORSP. It is our collective hope that the summit will create a space for you to make new connections, to engage with the community, and to create innovative projects that embody our mission here at SAM. We are honored to have special guests joining us today for our keynote luncheon, and I'd like to introduce some of them to you today. Will each individual who is announced please stand and remain standing, and audience, will you please hold your applause until we finish the list. First, Tricia Pollard, Sam Houston State University Distinguished Alumni and former member of the Texas State University System Board of Regents. Sean Cunningham, Vice Chancellor for Government Relations from the Texas State University System. Representing Governor Abbott's office is Betty Rousseau. Danny Pierce, Walker County Judge. Vicki McKenzie, Councilwoman, City of Huntsville. D. Howard Mullins, Councilwoman, City of Huntsville. Russell Humphrey, Mayor Pro Tem, City of Huntsville. Ray Hernandez, Huntsville Walker County Chamber of Commerce President and CEO. Gil Staley, the Woodlands Economic Development Partnership Chief Executive Officer. SHSU leadership is also here. Please welcome President Elisa White. Amanda Withers, our Chief Financial Officer and Senior Vice President for Operations. Heather Thielemann, Senior Vice President for Strategic Enrollment and Innovation. Thelma Mooney, our Interim Vice President for University Advancement. McCartney Johnson, Deputy to the President. Shar Self, Dean of the College of Business Administration. Chen Pin Lee, Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Science. Ken Hendrickson, Dean of the Graduate School and Associate Provost for Community Engagement. Will you please welcome them to the event today? You're in for a treat today. I'm good, but I'm not as good as about what's to follow. This is going to be absolutely amazing. We had an opportunity to sit backstage and work with John Quiñones and listen to him work the audience of our students and some of our staff, and it was absolutely inspiring beyond words. I know that today's keynote speaker will end being inspiring you too. I followed John Quiñones for years and years and have long been an admirer for the work he does. The story he will share with you today is one that will resonate deeply with many of you. To welcome our keynote, would you please welcome back to the podium Mr. Jesus Martinez, a May 2022 SHSU graduate, a fellow first-gen student, and now a reporter for CBS 19 in Tyler, Texas. Jesus.
Not used to speaking to a lot of people anymore, just speak to a camera now. Thank you, Provost. Glad to be back at SAM this afternoon, and like Provost Stevenson mentioned, I graduated this past May as a multi-platform journalism major with a minor in Spanish as well here from Sam Houston State University. And now I am a morning reporter for CBS 19, sharing stories across East Texas, just like John Quiñones has across the entire country. Now, growing up, kids would go out, watch cartoons as soon as they would get home, but not me. I'd go home and turn on the nightly news. I'd come home and, 5 o'clock news right there. And, there weren't many Hispanic reporters or anchors out in English-speaking networks out there. A lot of them, who were Hispanic worked on Univision or Telemundo. And even though Spanish is my first language, I wasn't fluent in Spanish as much. Even though it was my first language, I grew up in school. English had become my second first language. And, watching John Quiñones on TV, it was like, I could relate to him. He was Hispanic and Latino working in an English television. And all I would think of is, I want to be just like him when I grow up. And slowly but surely, we're getting there, one story at a time. And, combining and moving life stories and exceptional careers, John has incomparable sights and a powerful presence. He has emerged as one of the most inspiring keynotes in the speaking world today, and his moving presentations focus on his awe-defying journeys and celebrating the life life-changing powers of the human education, champion of the Latino American dream, and provide thought-provoking insights to human nature and the ethical behavior. In a lifetime of never taking no for an answer, took Quiñones from being a migrant farm worker to poverty from 30 years to now ABC News as the news anchor desk for 2020 and Primetime, and a 7th National Emmy Award winner for his reporting over the years. Along the way, he broke many barriers and won the highest accolades and became a role model for many, including myself. And as host and creator of the infamous show, What Would You Do?, the highly rated Hidden Camera Ethical Dilemma news magazine, now in its 14th season, Quiñones has really become the face of doing the right thing for millions of fans. Therefore, it is a great privilege for me to introduce today's keynote speaker, John Quiñones.
Hi guys, hi everyone. Thank you, thank you. How is everyone doing? Congratulations on this great two-day summit, man. It's really, really impressive. Thank you for that kind introduction. Jesus Martinez, huh? And thank you for pronouncing Quiñones so well, you know. It's not the easiest name to pronounce, you know. People, even at ABC, people have trouble saying Quiñones. I've been called Quiñones, Quiñones. But yes, I do that hidden camera show, What Would You Do? So you've been warned. We can put those hidden cameras anywhere. Like in this room, if you're sitting there and the person next to you passes out and you step over them to go get another drink, you're going to have me to talk to. You know, it's really great to be with all of you here at Sam Houston State University, which for more than 140 years has been preparing students for meaningful lives of achievement. I love this school's motto, the measure of a life is its service. And you know, in many ways, that's what my TV show, What Would You Do?, is all about. It's a show that I created now 15 years ago because I wanted to hold up a mirror to American society. We wanted to know, and what better tool to do that with than with hidden cameras, right, and on national television. But we wanted to know, how do you unlock the power and the light that exists in each and every one of us so that we're all better equipped to say, you know, that's wrong, or how can I help? You know, that's what Would You Do is all about. It poses that very question. When you witness any kind of injustice, racism, discrimination, gay bashing, someone being ridiculed because of the color of their skin or the accent in their voice, because of the religion they practice, and that little voice in the back of your head says, do something. Do you step in or do you step away? What would you do? After all, isn't that the very definition of a person's character? It's not what we do when everyone's watching. That's easy. It's what we do even when no one is watching. It's all about doing the right thing. And you know, we face these moral and ethical dilemmas every day in both our personal and our professional lives. It doesn't matter what you do for a living, whether you're a student at this fine university or whether you work in education, in corporate America, the legal profession, politics, of course, healthcare, or even in my profession, you know, the media, journalism. The question is, what do you do with that opportunity when we get a chance to right a wrong? Do you sound the alarm? Do you lend a helping hand? Or do you just go on minding your own business and walk away? Silence is complicity. And I think in today's America, we have to raise our voices louder than ever because these are tough times in our country. You know, I've never seen this country as divided as it is today, and I grew up during the civil rights movement. All you have to do is browse the internet or watch, you know, read social media or watch TV news. And every week you see these viral videos about anything from people arguing over Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter, debates over Confederate symbols and statues, the condemnation of Muslims, transgenders, the LGBTQ plus community. And during COVID, we had all those fights that we saw at stores and on airplanes about wearing masks or whether or not we should get vaccinated. And then there's an issue that's very close to my heart, the issue of immigration, with Latino families down along the border, not far from here, facing all kinds of obstacles as they search and they yearn for a better life. What would you do? You know, after all these years of doing the show, we filmed almost 1,000 scenarios. And when we started doing the show in 2020, I thought we would run out of ideas. I mean, how many can you do, right? And here we are. 15 years later, we've done 1,000 scenarios. I get messages on social media all the time from people saying, John, I had a what would you do moment today. I thought you were going to come out. Where were you? I tell folks, I'm just one guy, man. But these scenarios do happen in real life, and they happen to all of us, but especially people who have been marginalized or people of color. It's even happened to me. I mean, here I am. I think I'm a famous television reporter, right? My own TV show. I've been at ABC all these years. Well, the other day, I was at the Dallas airport getting ready to get on a plane to New York, right? And I was lucky enough to be flying in first class. So I'm standing in the first class line about to get on the plane. And then I noticed that all the other first class passengers, by mistake, have lined up in the economy line, which happens, but I was in the right place, right? And I was wearing a baseball cap and a sweatshirt. Nobody recognized me, and I'm standing there. And then the lady in the front of the first class line, who was in the wrong line, right? She looks over at me and says, "Sir, are you even in first class?" And I didn't want to argue, so I just nodded, and I pointed to the sign above my head. And she said, "Well, the first class passengers are over here, so get to the back of the line." So I wasn't going to argue. I went to the started walking to the back of the line, right? Who cares? So I'm 10 people behind. You know, I'm lucky to be flying at all, you know, so. But on my way to the back of the line, she yelled out, "The announcement was made in English. We speak English in America." And then the other people in line had the same reaction you just did. And they're like, "John, is this a what would you do scenario?" And I said, "No, unfortunately, this is real life." And as I'm standing in the back of the line, my only concern was that I was going to have to sit next to this mean person on the airplane, right? So I got to the plane, and no, she was by herself, by the window, no surprise there. And as I walked on the plane, I couldn't resist. You know, I leaned over to her and I whispered, "You know, ma'am, my name is John Quiñones, and I do a TV show called What Would You Do? And you would be perfect for the show, you know? You could play the part of the racist." She gave me another dirty look. But that's why we do the show, because this country, I think, needs it right now more than ever. I got the greatest compliment on social media the other day when someone said that the world would be a better place if we all thought John Quiñones was in the next room monitoring our behavior, because of course we would be on our best behavior. So how do we do it? How do we become active bystanders who do something when they witness the injustice rather than passive observers when they see the injustice? I think it's as simple as putting yourselves in the shoes of the victim, right? I think it's a philosophy that's as old as the Bible. You know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And it's something that I think we learn when we're very young. You know, there's that great song from the old musical, South Pacific. And it's a song that the lyrics say, "You've got to be carefully taught before it's too late, before you're 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught." Well, the opposite is also true, right? You can also be taught to be more compassionate, to be more loving, to be kind, and to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. And you know, in some ways, I think it's easier for those of us who have been there. After all these years of doing What Would You Do, I have found that time and again, the people who step in and come to the rescue are people who themselves have been the victims or the targets of racism, bullying, gay bashing, spousal abuse. They sound the alarm because they know what it's like and how painful it can be. They've been there. You know, in many ways, I feel like because of that, I was born to do this kind of show because of where I come from and the world that I grew up in. A lot of people who only know me from television see me up there with the great people of ABC, Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyer, David Muir, Robin Roberts. People who only know me from the show have no idea the long, hard struggle that it took for John Quiñones to get to ABC News. I was born in poverty, in the barrio, in San Antonio, on the west side of San Antonio. You know how some people say we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. We knew we were poor. We had an old black and white television in the back of the house. We saw how the other side lived. You know, my dad was a janitor. My mom, he dropped out of the 3rd grade, Bruno, my father, to pick cotton in Lockhart, Texas. My mother also dropped out of school in the 4th grade. So they spoke very little English. And this despite, I didn't speak English till I was 6 years old. This despite the fact that the Quiñones family has been in Texas 7 generations. I'm probably more American than everyone in this room. But back, you didn't have to learn English in San Antonio. Over 60% of the population is Hispanic. And people forget that Texas was once part of Spain and part of Mexico, right? And so was California, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona. Even the names are in Spanish. Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, parts of Wyoming and Utah, but who's counting, right? So you didn't have to learn. I get a kick out of people coming up to me today and say, John Quiñones, you're Mexican-American. When did your family cross the border and come to America? It's like, we were always here. I didn't cross the border crossed me, right? Suddenly, speaking English. But I'm very proud to be an American, first and foremost, but also proud to be Mexican-American. When I was, like I said, we didn't learn English until I went to the 1st grade school. My 2 sisters, Irma and Rosa Maria, and I, we couldn't afford preschool or kindergarten, right? And this is before bilingual education. So we went straight to the 1st grade in public school without speaking English. And the teacher didn't speak Spanish. So there I am, little Juanito Quiñones, I'll never forget the first day in school, sitting in Mrs. Gregory's 1st grade class, sort of twiddling my thumbs because she doesn't speak Spanish and I don't speak English. And on the first day of school, right, the school bell rings at 10 o'clock in the morning and it's recess time. So all the kids go out to the playground. Where does little Juanito Quiñones go? I live 2 blocks from the school. I walked home. I go in, I remember going through my front door, my dear mother, rest her soul, Maria, going, Juanito, ¿qué pasó? What happened? I said, se acabó. It's over, Mom. Really? I like school. 2 hours and you're done. This is going to work out very nicely. She grabbed me by the ear, literally, and dragged me back to Mrs. Gregory's class because she knew the value of an education, not ever having gotten one herself. They used to punish us for speaking Spanish in school. The coach at our junior high school had a big old wooden paddle with holes drilled in it for extra speed and power, and they would give us 3 spankings on our rear ends if they caught us speaking Spanish. Do you know what that does to your brain? When I was 8 years old, I wanted to do anything I could to help support my family. My father was, a janitor, and he also did yard work on weekends. But he needed help, and I remember I started shining shoes in San Antonio. My cousin Joey and I, we built this little shoe shine box, and we bought some polish and rags, and we would charge 10 cents a pair of shoes. And we would go to the cantinas, the bars in Guadalupe Street, because the drunk guys didn't realize how much they were tipping you. We made a killing, man. Until one night we're coming home, and we were jumped by a gang. And it was a tough neighborhood, and they stole all my rags and my shoe shine polish and my earnings from that night and my cousins. And that was the end of my shoe shining career. But when I was 13, my father was laid off from work. And we did what a lot of Latino families had to do back then. We became migrant farm workers. My 2 sisters, my mother and my father and I, jumped on the back of these trucks with strangers. We didn't know who these people were, but there were 7 trucks headed north. And we journeyed 1,700 miles from San Antonio to Northport, Michigan, the cherry capital of the world, where we picked cherries. And I remember teetering on the top of these ladders overlooking orchards and orchards of trees. And it would pay us 75 cents per bucket of cherries, and it would take me 2 hours to fill that darn bucket strapped around my neck for 75 cents. And we did that for about 6 or 7 weeks. And then we did what all other, migrant farm workers do. We followed the crops, right? So we went from Michigan to Ohio, a little town called Swanton, Ohio, just outside of Toledo, where we picked tomatoes. for 35 cents a bushel. And man, I was a champion tomato picker. I would do 100 bushels a day. Well, back then, that's $35 a day, right? And my father would do 130 bushels, and my mother would contribute, and my sisters would contribute, and we learned the value of a family coming together in times of needed help and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? But I'll never forget being on my knees on the cold, hard ground at 6 in the morning, looking at a row of tomato plants that for a young 13-year-old boy's eyes seemed to go on for miles and miles. That's what I had to look forward to that day. And my father Bruno looking down saying, Juanito, do you want to do this kind of work for the rest of your life? Or do you want to get a college education someday? It was a no-brainer. I knew I didn't want to do that kind of back-breaking work for the rest of my life, but no one believed in me. When I came back to San Antonio to school, and I would ask my teachers and my counselors, how do I prepare for the SATs? How do I prepare for the ACTs? How do I take advanced placement classes in math, biology, English? Do you know what my own teachers and my own counselors would say? They would look at me and they say, John, it's wonderful that you have this dream of someday being a television reporter. Because I want to be a reporter since I was 12. I used to watch Geraldo Rivera on 2020, right? And I wanted to be like Geraldo, swashbuckling, traveling to Turkey and the Middle East and Latin America. And he was my idol. So they would say to me, my teachers, it's wonderful that you have this dream of someday being a television reporter, but we think you should try wood shop or metal shop or auto mechanics. Not that there's anything wrong with those great trades. A lot of people make a good, hard living doing that kind of work, right? But I wanted to go to college. And my own teachers and my own counselors would do what people do on that TV show, What Would You Do? They judged me. They judged me by the color of my skin and the accent in my voice and the fact that no one in my family had ever gone to college. So what gave me the audacity to think that I was college material? But thank God for my mother, Maria. She was the one who kept inspiring and motivating. Even though she had very little education, formal education herself, she was the one who kept motivating me. She would say, mijo, my son, mijo, it doesn't matter that you have to wear the same clothes to school every other day, right? We wash them, right? They're clean. She would say, mijo, don't be so embarrassed about having to take bean and tortilla tacos for lunch when all the other kids are taking their fancy bologna and white bread. Hey, now we know that beans and tortillas have more protein, right? We got the last laugh on that one. But she would say, mijo, that doesn't matter. What matters, what really matters, what truly matters is what's in here in your cabeza, in your brain, and what's in here in your corazón, in your heart. You know, the great African-American poet Maya Angelou wrote in a poem once that we all marvel at the beauty of a butterfly, right? We look at a butterfly, we look at the gorgeous wingspan and the gorgeous colors. But seldom do we consider all the changes that that butterfly has to go through to attain that beauty. And man, I'm no butterfly, but my sisters and I, we went through some changes. But then along came the first hero in my life, you know, besides my mother and father, and it was my English teacher, Mrs. Gutierrez, in 10th grade English. When everyone else had said, you're not college material, what gives you the audacity to think you could ever go to college? My English teacher, Mrs. Gutierrez, in the 10th grade at Brackenridge High School, said to me, John, I love the way you write your essays in literature class. You're a great storyteller. Have you thought about journalism? And I said, yes, I've been watching Geraldo all these years. She said, no, I think you should go talk to the man who runs the school newspaper here at the high school, Mr. Harris. So she introduces me to Mr. Harris, and he hires me as a reporter. So I've been doing this since I was 13 years old. And I did pretty good, and then within 3 months, I became the chief of editorials for the Brackenridge Times. So there I was, writing these big investigative stories, like, why are the teachers parking in the students' parking spaces, you know? Tonight we go under cover and find out. And I loved it, you know? As I said, it was during the civil rights movement, and I remembered the words of Martin Luther King, who once said that in times of adversity, you got to have faith. And faith is taking that first step. It doesn't matter if you can't see the entire staircase. Just take that first step. Because tomorrow, there'll be another step. And the next day, another baby step. So following the advice of Martin Luther King, I became a reporter for my high school newspaper. And then along came another hero in my life. And sometimes heroes don't have to be people, right? In my case, it was a government program called Upward Bound. And you're familiar with the TRIO programs. I know you have them here. Upward Bound was an effort by the federal government to reach out to inner city schools across the country. And the theory was simple, that the only way out of poverty was through education. What a thought, right? So what the federal government did was they went to inner city schools and they picked 10 students from schools throughout America, and they came to my school and they interviewed many of us. Out of 120 students, they picked me. And I don't know why, I was one of the 10 students, because my grades weren't that great, but they saw some spark, I guess, and they hired me. And they brought me onto the program on Upward Bound. And they let us go to college for 6 weeks every summer of our high school career, which was a big deal, not only for me, but for my parents. You know, Latino families can be so tight-knit that they don't want to see their children go live in a dorm, God forbid, right? And so this taught them that it's okay to let your son or daughter go away to college for 6 weeks in the 10th grade of school. So I went to Texas State University in San Marcos, and it was, as I said, quite an education, not only for me and an opportunity, but for my parents. I told the story at lunch today. When I said, you know, Latino families are so tight-knit, as I mentioned. When I said goodbye to my mother, and I was going to San Marcos, which is 45 minutes from my house, for just 6 weeks, you would think I was going to Vietnam, you know. My mother was in tears saying, mijo, when am I going to see you again? It's like, Mom, I'm going to be back Saturday with some dirty laundry, you know. And I want some of those bean and tortilla tacos, you know. But it was an education for them. So that was my hero, you know. That was my next step, following the advice of Martin Luther King. Don't have to look at the entire staircase. And then I was able, because of Upward Bound, to go to St. Mary's University and got a degree there. And then I got an internship at a radio station when I was 18 years old, a freshman. That's my advice to all the college students here. Whatever it is you're interested in pursuing, try to get an internship there, whether it's medicine or law or journalism. My opportunity came at a country music station when I was 18. They were looking for interns for $2 an hour, and I got to work there. And you got to be from Texas, and you guys are, so you understand, to really understand this. But the DJs at this radio station, this country music station, had horses in the back of the studios that they would use in parades and public appearances, like rodeos, right? My job for $2 an hour, part of my job, was to clean up the horse poop in the corral and feed the horses. But at night I would go back into the control room, where they had beautiful microphones and reel-to-reel recorders, and I would practice my delivery, right? Because I had a heavy Mexican accent. I used to say, these are my shoes, this is my shirt. I had to learn to overcome that, and I would practice. The only problem was at that hour of the night, when I was finally able to get in the studio, all the professional DJs, the announcers, were gone. The only one there left to criticize my work was the janitor, and his name was Pablo Gonzalez. And Pablo's English was worse than my father's. But I would drag him in there and I say, Pablo, you got to listen to this. How does it sound? And he would go, más o menos, more or less. It sounds pretty good. He was my first critic. And then they let me do something on the air at the age of 18 for the very first time. And again, a lesson to you students, get that internship, because I got to do something on the air, on the radio, for the very first time. There would be some new medicine out, and I got to tell you where you could buy it in the last 5 seconds. Do you want to hear what the first words John Quiñones ever said on the radio? I got to say, now available at Walgreens. That's it. That was it. And I would call my relatives, you know, my aunts and uncles. You got to listen at 1:12. But don't blink, because you'll miss the whole damn thing. And then they let me do the news on Sunday nights. It was really Monday morning, between 1 and 4 in the morning. I do 5 minutes of news on the hour between all the country music station. I think we had 4 listeners, my mother, my father, and my 2 sisters. But that's how you learn, right? That's how you learn, one step at a time. You don't have to see the entire staircase. And then I got a job in Houston at KTRH Radio. And I got another job. I liked it, but I was getting paid very little money, and no one would hire me in television in Texas. I can show you 80 letters of rejection that I got from every town in Texas. And I was depressed and ready to give up on journalism and maybe try to go to law school at the University of Houston if I could somehow come up with the money. And I met someone who had gone to Columbia University and at an audition. And she said to me, she said, John, don't give up journalism. I can tell you have such a passion for telling stories. You'd be a lousy lawyer. You'd be bored. If you're going to go back to school, why don't you go to grad school? And she said, I went to Columbia University in New York, an Ivy League school. I'd never heard of Columbia. The only time I'd been out of Texas was to pick tomatoes in Ohio and cherries in Michigan, right? But she wrote a letter for me, and I got accepted. And not only that, because then I said, how am I going to pay for it, right? I don't have money. So I knocked on every financial aid door. Persistence, young students, persistence, right? And I begged them. I said, look, I've been accepted. I need help. I'll take a job, grants, loans. And I wound up getting an NBC fellowship to study for my master's at Columbia, which was a full ride. So the irony is that I've spent all these years at ABC, but NBC paid for my tuition. But it was because of that degree that I wound up going to Chicago and got a job in television there at the CBS station in Chicago. And while I was in Chicago, I did a story that I had wanted to do for a long time about an issue that's still a hot button issue today, immigration, right? Even 35 years ago, the same problem. We really haven't fixed the immigration problem in this country, even though they say they're trying in Washington. But even back then, I convinced my news director, my boss in Chicago, to let me go undercover and go to Mexico. I was 27 years old, right? I looked the part of the immigrant young man trying to get into this country, and I'm Mexican, you know, so I convinced him to let me go to Mexico because I wanted to research and show to the American audience what are the push factors that make someone so desperate in Mexico or Latin America to swim across the Rio Grande, risk their lives, or the desert in Arizona to come here and get a job as a dishwasher or a roofer for very little money. How bad must it be? So I told my news director, let me go undercover. And I told all my friends. He said, okay, go. And I told all my friends, I'm going to go undercover. I'm going to pose as a Mexican. They had the same reaction. It's not going to take a lot of acting, John. But I went to Mexico, and I went undercover, and I pretended that I was just another Mexicano trying to come to the U.S., looking for a coyote, a smuggler. And I found one who for $300 back then, now it's $20,000, but back then for $300, he sold me a fake birth certificate and a fake Social Security card. And then he said, okay, tonight I will put you on an inner tube and you'll float to Texas in Laredo. Now he thought he didn't know I was a reporter, right? I'm wearing a hidden camera, I'm wired for sound. So then I tell the camera crew from Chicago where to hide in the bushes on the Texas side of the river. And I said, okay guys, tonight at 7 o'clock, I hope I'll be floating across the Rio Grande. Then I went back across the bridge in Laredo, and I met up with my coyote, who then puts me on an inner tube. And he tells me to take my clothes off, right? Because you put your clothes in a plastic bag so it's not wet when you cross to the other side, because then the Border Patrol will know that you just crossed the river. So he puts me on an inner tube, and I floated across the Rio Grande, all captured on hidden camera. And then I didn't stop there. I got on a bus, and I went back to Chicago, because remember, this is for a station in Chicago, and they have a big Hispanic population. So I wanted to show how bad it was there. So I went to a restaurant in Chicago where we had heard that the owner of that restaurant had 7 undocumented workers working for him, and he had not paid them in 17 weeks. And every time they complained, he would say, hey guys, you get to sleep here in the basement at the restaurant. You get to eat all the food you want. You keep complaining, and I'll call immigration and have you deported. And by the way, that happens in this country today, right? So I went to that restaurant pretending that I just arrived from Mexico, and he hires me. I only spoke Spanish. I was dressed down, 27 years old. He hires me as a dishwasher. So by day, wearing a hidden camera, I'm washing dishes and bussing tables. And then at night, I went down there and I slept with the other 7 Mexican workers who had not been paid in 17 weeks. And I still wonder what they must have thought, because by day, I'm up there at the restaurant, washing dishes. And then at night, I pulled out a little camera and I started interviewing them in Spanish about their lives. And they told me how they were being, through tears, they told me how they were being held as virtual slaves in that restaurant. Well, the next day, I came back to work, this time wearing a suit, speaking fluent English, with a camera crew behind me. And I remember we had to chase the owner of that restaurant through the parking lot because he didn't want to talk to me about what he was doing to those guys. But the day after my story aired on CBS Chicago, about me swimming across the Rio Grande, paying the coyote, working at that restaurant, the day after it aired, the U.S. government moved in, they shut down the restaurant, they arrested the owner, and they got the Mexican workers the money they were owed and temporary visas to remain here while they worked on their residency. And I knew then that those were the kinds of stories that as a Latino reporter I could tell better than anyone. I call journalism the candle in the darkness. Imagine this room has gone pitch dark. There's a storm outside, God forbid, and the lights are all out. We can't see our hands in front of our faces, looking for an exit. And the journalist, he or she, is the person with a little candle or the little flashlight, and they can shine it on the darkest corners of the room to illuminate injustice, to illuminate corruption, to illuminate civil rights violations, human rights violations. I think when journalism is done right, those are the kinds of stories that we should be telling. That story won my first Emmy Award, and I've won 7, but that's the most special, right? And it got me to the attention of ABC News. Peter Jennings in New York, they were looking for a Latino, someone who spoke Spanish to cover Central America. Some of you might remember, back in the 80s and 90s, Nicaragua, El Salvador, the Contras, the Sandinistas. ABC had a reporter from New York named Bill Stewart who was shot and killed on camera because he didn't speak Spanish. He was covering the war in Nicaragua. And the networks then, in all their wisdom, said, we should hire somebody who speaks Spanish to go to Latin America. And there I was in Chicago with my little Emmy, and I was hired by ABC, and I loved it. I loved working with Peter Jennings, covering Nicaragua, Salvador, Cuba, Argentina, Chile. That was my world. And I worked with Peter Jennings. Some of you might remember what a great anchorman he was, who passed away like 12 years ago. But he was like James Bond, man. This was like Agent 007. Always impeccably dressed, and he had that fancy British accent. He was actually Canadian, but he was just very good. And I was in awe of Peter Jennings and also intimidated by him. And one of my first stories in Central America, I got an interview with the president of Nicaragua. I was a brand new reporter, right? So I get this exclusive interview with Daniel Ortega, who, by the way, is the president today in Nicaragua again. But back then, he was a young revolutionary, and I got an interview with him, and back then it was a big deal. So I call New York, and I get Peter Jennings on the phone, and I said, Peter, I got an exclusive interview with Daniel Ortega. And he said, fine, young man. I don't think he knew my name even. I was brand new. Fine, young man. I look forward to having you on World News tonight. I hang up the phone with Peter Jennings. The phone rings again. It's the president's office in Nicaragua canceling my interview. So now it's 4:30. They made a 2-minute hold in the broadcast for my story, and I got to call James Bond in New York to tell him that I won't be able to deliver it. And I'm shaking in my boots. I thought I was getting yelled at or maybe fired, right? And I get Peter on the phone and said, Peter, I'm so sorry. The interview fell through. And instead of yelling at me or instead of getting me fired, Peter Jennings gave me some words of advice that I carry with me to this very day. He said, young man, this is going to happen again in your career where someone promises you something and they don't deliver. He said, listen to me. Don't worry so much about talking to the movers and shakers of the world. You know, the presidents of countries, politicians, the presidents of corporations or universities. When they want to get their message out, they can issue a press release. They can call a news conference. They can gather the media. He said, don't worry so much about talking to them. Don't worry so much about talking to the movers and shakers of the world. Concentrate on talking to the moved and the shaken. In other words, talk to the real people. Talk to the campesinos in the countryside. Give a voice to people who don't have a voice. As a Latino reporter, you can go into Nicaragua, Salvador, Guatemala, and you can talk to the campesinos, to the folks who don't have access to the media, and you can tell their story. Give a voice to people who don't have a voice. Concentrate on the moved and the shaken. And that's all I did for the next several years at ABC. Among the stories that I covered was I was in Colombia when covering the presidential elections there. And then one night the story didn't turn out to be much of a story about the election, right? But I could see from my hotel room in Bogota, Colombia, some children walking around the streets. And they were sniffing glue, right? They put glue on their shirt sleeve and they would inhale it, right? And get high. And I asked the person who worked for us in Colombia, who are those kids? And she said, they're called gamines. They're like street urchins. They're little runaways, castaways, children nobody wants. And some of them as young as 6, 7, 8 years old, 300 of them. And they live in the sewer system of Bogota. And I couldn't believe it. I said, well, isn't anyone trying to help them? She goes, there's one man, his name is Jaime Jaramillo, who is he's a wealthy industrialist in Colombia who finds oil for American oil companies in Latin America. But at night, he can't sleep knowing that there are children who live in the manholes, underneath the manhole covers on the streets of Colombia. Because when I noticed from my hotel room window, I could see them opening up the manhole covers on the street, and they would climb down into the sewers late at night. And I said to her, is the military or the government trying to help? And she said, no, the military, they're trying to clean up the streets of Colombia, but they're afraid to go down the dark world controlled by these kids. So what they do is they open up the manhole covers, they pour gasoline down there, they throw a match in there to burn them out. And I couldn't believe it. So I said, I want to meet this hero, Jaime Jaramillo, who's trying to help them and open up an orphanage. And she said, okay, so I met with him. So I go to Jaime Jaramillo's place. He didn't have much of a home for the kids. Most of them were still in the sewers. And he showed me an album full of photos of children, the few children that he had rescued. Some of them with their faces melted from the fires that the police and the military had started. And I said, I got to go down there. I got to tell this story. So I called New York. I wasn't one of the 2020 correspondents. I was just a breaking news correspondent. But I knew the story was bigger than a 2-minute piece on the evening news. I knew it was like a 60 Minutes, right, or a 2020 or a Dateline kind of show. So I told my boss, the producer of the show, I wasn't on his show, but I said, let me do the story. And he said, if you're crazy enough to go down there, who am I to say no? So we took a camera crew down into the bowels of Bogota, Colombia. You can imagine the disease and the germs that fester next to the rivers of waste of 30 million people in Bogota, Colombia. I met a little girl, 16 years old, who had just given birth to a baby. Can you imagine starting life out in the sewers of the city? And we filmed it all for 2 weeks. And then I took it back to New York. And it was my first entree onto 2020, my story. And the day after it aired, my story about the children of the sewers, American viewers like yourselves sent in $1 million in donations. Again, the power of that camera and that light when it's used in the right way. Now the kids were all pulled out of the sewers. Jaime Jaramillo was able to build that orphanage that he wanted to build for these kids, all because we were able to expose what was going on in Colombia. And after that, I did another story about children who cut sugarcane and held as also virtual modern-day slavery in the Dominican Republic. Black kids from Haiti kidnapped and told to spend the rest of their lives cutting sugarcane, some of the most difficult work in the world, for $3 a day. We exposed that story, and then I went to Africa and did another story, and that's all I wanted to do, but then came this opportunity to do a show called What Would You Do? And despite all the traveling and all the awards, that is the show that's gotten me more notoriety, especially with the young folks, than any other show. I think because of social media. I'm a meme now on TikTok. It's wild. Everywhere I go, high school kids, elementary school kids, they do their own what would you do's. And people often ask me, what are your favorites? And I've done so many of them. We've done, like I said, 1,000 scenarios. Some of them are really pretty whimsical and simple, like what would you do if you see somebody stealing a bicycle, right? So we took a brand new bike and we chained it up to a pole along a jogging path in a park in New Jersey. And we had an actor pretending with a hacksaw and the wire cutters, pretending to be cutting the chain. And we told the actors, listen, if people ask you if you're stealing the bike, say yes, because we didn't want people to think he just lost the key, right? So at first, we did it with a white young man, about 25 years old, baseball cap, polo shirt, hacksaw, wire cutters, and he's cutting the chain. And people, when it was a white young guy cutting the chain, stealing the bike, they even asked him, are you stealing that bike? And he said, yeah, I need a bike. This bike has been here a while. I'm going to take this bike. People muttered something under their breath when it was a white thief. They shook their head, but no one called 911. So then, as we often do on the show, we switched the actors. And instead of a white young man, it's an African-American young man. Same age, same outfit, baseball cap, polo shirt, with the hacksaw and the wire cutters. Within seconds after that young black actor started cutting the chain, he was surrounded by a posse of people who not only called 911, which they should have done for the other thief, right? But they're taking his video and pictures of him on their cell phone saying, we got you now. Even the black actor was like, John, this is ridiculous. The white guy got away with it. And then as a final twist, we had a very attractive young woman play the part of the thief. Her beautiful hair blowing in the wind, with a jogging outfit, very pretty young woman with a hacksaw and the wire cutters. When she started cutting the chain, men helped her steal the bike. Time and again, they're like falling over each other. Human nature, right? Male nature, perhaps, right? So people are helping. I remember there was a middle-aged couple on their bicycles, right, nearby, and the wife said to her husband, honey, she's stealing that bike. He goes, yes, but she's a damsel in distress. She needs help. So he's pulling the bike out of the pole, and of course the actress is going, you're so strong. She's playing along with it. And he's like, thank you, thank you. And then she asked him, do you see any cops around? So now he's like on the lookout. He's an accomplice. I still wonder what the ride home with his wife must have been like after we told him it was all part of what would you do. We've done so many of them. We always ask people to sign a release so that we can use them on television. If they say no, we won't embarrass someone. We won't put them on the air. We won't show their faces. Even though legally we could, because we're filming in a place that's it's a public place where there's no expectation of privacy, as the law says, we still don't want to embarrass anyone. Maybe somebody loses their job because they did something stupid, right, when they had a few drinks at a bar. So if you don't sign a release, we won't put you on the air. The irony, the funny thing is that most people sign the release, even those who say the most god-awful things. Like, I'll tell them, I'll say, you sounded kind of racist there. You sure you want to sign this? Yes, I don't care. When am I on television? I want to tell the family to watch. So we did one at a bar where the question was, what would you do if you see a drunk person overdoing it and having too many shots of liquor, and then he's about to get in his car and drive away? And to make it even more pressing, we had an 8-year-old boy playing the part of his son. So the little boy is saying, Daddy, we got to go. I got soccer practice. And the father, the actor, is like, oh, just one more shot of tequila, son. And he's downing them, and he's falling down. He's an actor. He's drinking water. But to everyone else, it looks like the real deal, right? And in New York, we have so many great actors. So he was very convincing. So he's dropping his keys. He gets in his car with his little boy, and he tries to drive away. Who's going to stop him, right? Well, a lot of people did intervene and told him not to drive like that. But a lot of people let him go, not only endangering him and his son's life, but innocent people, if it had been real, right? Innocent people on the highway. But among the people who stopped him was this couple at the bar. Very nice middle-aged couple. They're having lunch. They saw this drunk guy, or they thought he was drunk, right? Doing shots and falling down drunk. So they stepped in right away. They did all the right things. They took away they told the bartender not to serve him anymore. They got him coffee. They sat him down. They comforted the little boy. They took the guy's keys away. They called him a taxi. All the right things. So I said, wow, what a hero. So I come out from hiding. I'm usually in the back, right? So I come out and I tell everyone, hi, I'm John Quiñones. This is part of a TV show. He was just an actor. And usually there's a big sigh of relief. People are happy that it wasn't real, right? So I go up to this couple and I said, man, you guys are the heroes of the day. You did all the right things. You stepped in. You got him coffee. You sat him down. Just sign a release so we can put you on What Would You Do on television in a couple of weeks. And they said, no. I said, come on. You're the heroes of the day. We need you. America needs to know how people step in and come to the rescue like this, please. They said, no, we're not going to sign anything. We don't want to be on your show. And I said, I know if you had done the wrong thing, maybe you wouldn't, but please, why not? And they looked at me and they said, because I'm not married to her and she's not married to me. And if you put us on television, so it tells you something about the sliding scale of morality, right? So people you might do something good about one thing, but not so much on the other hand. But I'll leave you with my favorite scenario. Someone asked me today, and I told them I'd save it for my talk today. My favorite what would you do scenario. You know, we had a person walking along the sidewalk. The question was, what would you do? What would you do if you're walking down the sidewalk and the person in front of you collapses? And you don't know if they've had a heart attack or if they just fainted. And we did it at 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning next to the train station in Newark, New Jersey, where people are going in to get to work, right, or go to school. So now you have that other added element. Not only do you not know medicine and how to help someone who is collapsed, but you're also in a hurry, right? What would you do? So we did the scenario at first with a well-dressed businesswoman. Well-dressed woman in her 40s. She's walking along, a stunt artist who collapses very convincingly. And when she fell, people right away came to the rescue. They covered her with a blanket. They put a pillow under her head, and they called 911, which they should have done. And I said, well, who would have thought in Newark, New Jersey, that they would be so nice? But then I said, but wait a minute. As we often do on the show, we switch up the actors. And instead of a well-dressed businesswoman, it's a homeless man who is elderly. He's like 85 years old, disheveled, dirty, smelly, and he's holding a beer can in his hand. What will people do then, right? So we had an actor, an elderly actor, play that role, a stunt artist who falls very convincingly. When he did it, when we had the older actor, the homeless guy, walking along and collapse, 88 people walked by, and no one is stopping to help. People were stepping over him. One lady made the sign of the cross and kept going. And we're like blown away. I said, well, I guess if you're homeless, you're not going to get a lot of help. And I'm about ready to come out, right, with the cameras and tell everyone it's just a show, when suddenly, before I could get out there, we heard the tapping of a walking cane on the sidewalk. And then into the frame of the hidden camera comes this beautiful African-American woman who's stumbling along with a cane because she has suffered a stroke. And guess what? She's homeless herself. And guess what? She stops to help. And she starts asking people going by, excuse me, does someone have a cell phone? Because she didn't have a cell phone. Does someone have a cell phone so we can call 911 for this man? He was white, she's black. Not that that should matter, right? 38 more people go by. We're counting them, and no one is stopping. She then stumbles down to him and did something we didn't expect. She takes the beer can out of the actor's hands, right? And she stumbles over with her walking cane to the trash can and throws it away, as if she was thinking, maybe if I give him a little bit of dignity and people don't think he's a drunk or a wino, maybe they'll help. 48 more people go by. We're counting them. No one is stopping to help. The hidden camera was really tight on this woman's face. And I'll never forget, she made a fist to the heavens, and she was almost cursing God himself, going like angry, going, how can you allow this to happen? And then she stumbled down again, and we're going to hear it because the man on the ground, the actor, was wearing a wireless microphone, and she said to him, sir, I don't know your name, but I'm going to call you Billy. And she said, Billy, my name is Linda Hamilton. And don't you worry, my man, I'm homeless too, and I'm going to stay here until help arrives. And then finally, a woman stops, finally, and calls 911. And the irony is, when I came out and I asked her why, she said, because I watch your show. And I told my kids that if I ever saw it, I would do the right thing. But in all the excitement, when we're getting people to sign releases, right, and the cameras come out and all that, we lost our hero. Linda Hamilton, the woman who would stop to help, slipped away. Now, we knew her name, so we put it on What Would You Do a couple of weeks later on the show. And the day after it aired, we got thousands of social media posts and phone calls and emails, people asking, who was that woman? We want to help that homeless woman, our fans of the show, the viewers, right? And they went on Facebook and started a GoFundMe page, and they raised $10,000 for this woman. So, and they put her picture from the TV screen on the Facebook page called Touched by an Angel, touched by Linda Hamilton. So then my producers said, John, we got to go find her and give her the money, right? So how do you find a homeless person? So for the next 2 weeks, we were out in Newark, New Jersey with her poster of her, posted all over the place in Newark, homeless shelters, liquor stores, train stations, and we found her. So 2 weeks later, my producer said, John, come, we got to interview Linda Hamilton and ask her why she did that, and bring your laptop so she can see it, right? So I brought my laptop, I sat on some church steps in Newark, New Jersey with this homeless lady, and I showed her the piece, and I said, do you remember when that man fell and you helped? And she goes, yes, I remember, yes. I said, well, you caused quite a stir, Linda. People are calling you a hero. They put up this Facebook post, a picture of you called Touched by an Angel. You know, so we got her the $10,000 in the bank. ABC got her a house to live in. We got her medicine that she was supposed to be taking for her heart. And the thing that made her most excited of all, we got her own cell phone. So like a 12-year-old, she's jumping up and down with joy. And I said, Linda, now the next time you witness something like this, you can call 911. But at the end, I said, Linda, people are calling you a hero. They're calling you an angel. They've had this Facebook page all about you. Do you consider yourself an angel or a hero? And she looked me straight on my eyes, and she goes, no way, John Quiñones. No way. She said, let me tell you what I think happened that day. She said, I think God put me on that corner, on that street, on that day, because he knew you were there with your What Would You Do cameras. And he wanted to teach people a lesson. And who better to teach that lesson than someone who has walked in the shoes of the homeless? So today I leave you with that message. The next time you witness an injustice and the little voice in the back of your head says, do something, remember the words and the actions of Linda Hamilton, this woman who was homeless, who had suffered a stroke, and yet she stopped to help a stranger who was down, not because she was going to be on national television. She did not know that. Not because she was going to get $10,000 in the bank and medicine for her heart and a house to live in and her own cell phone. She did not know that. She did it because, as my dear Mother Maria would say, her corazón, her heart, told her it was the right thing to do. Thank you for having me here. It's been a real pleasure talking to all of you. Thanks. Have a great conference, right? Thank you. Thank you very much. You okay? Yeah, of course. Oh, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for coming to Sam Houston State, and thank you all for attending. I think the message is together we can do great things, and that is the essence of this summit. So there are QR codes around the halls. Scan them, and it will take you to the program. Our desire for this summit is to get people connected. so that we can do great things for our students and for our community. So there are events the rest of the day, there are faculty giving presentations, there are workshops, and there are events tomorrow as well. So scan the QR codes, attend the events, network, and let's do great things for our students. Thank you.